Alright, so hey guys, welcome to another Warframe video, and update 27.4, the Railjack Revisited, part 1 is finally here, so let's check it out. Now, I've already covered most of these changes in a previous video where I was discussing the workshop for Railjack Revisited, so I'm not gonna focus on that too much, and I'm mostly gonna focus on the newer changes and actually on how it feels. But I'm of course gonna go over some of the bigger changes, like for example, the doubling of Railjack's vacuum range, which is really good, and they also tweak the way vacuum works a little bit, so it should be less dodgy less often, because every now and then it could leave some items sort of hovering behind you and that kind of stuff. Another pretty big change, especially for the farmers out there, is that the sentient anomaly in Vel Proxima now has no downtime, and it will simply shift from one node to another every 30 minutes. Then they doubled the base speed of the Railjack while simultaneously nerfing the dodging and boosting, though overall you will be faster. Then they doubled the amount of Revelite you craft from 50 to 100, and they tripled the amount of titanium and asterite you get from resource drops. Then we have a pretty interesting change in that Grenier on foot enemies will now drop Arcwing mods, which could make it a really good way of farming Arcwing mods, especially if you're not a massive fan of farming Arcwing, and they made captains in these missions drop operation and dual stat Arcwing mods, which is really cool. Another pretty interesting change is that Railjack missions will now reward a decent amount of credits at the end, so Earth Proxima missions will give you between 30 and 45,000 credits, Saturn Proxima missions will give you between 50 and 75,000 credits, and Vel Proxima will give you between 80 and 150,000 credits. Then for the ship combat changes, the most interesting ones for me are that the number of fighters you encounter in each mission is gonna be random. It's not gonna be a set number like 60 if you're in the Vel Proxima or whatever, and overall your Railjack weapons will overheat slower and they will do more damage because they reduce the health and armor on enemy fighters by half. Now, as far as on-foot combat is concerned in Railjack, it should be much easier now because they straight up just reduce the health of all the enemies you will be fighting on foot by half. Now, I know some people are like, I see no problem with the old numbers, I can just destroy them with my min-max melee weapon, but you know, maybe, just maybe, we shouldn't be measuring things based on min-max melee weapons because they are kind of dumb right now. Also, my problem with these enemies wasn't necessarily that they were super beefy, it was more that their beefiness was wildly out of proportion. They were just like 10 times tankier than everything else in the game, even if it was like double or triple their level. So think of it more as a normalization of their stats. Next on the menu we have some pacing changes, and the biggest one here for me is that they capped the number of hazards you can have on your ship, so you can only have one firestorm, one electric storm, and one breach at a time. But they're more dangerous, they cost more resources to repair, however they do give you more XP when you repair them. Then we have enemies now spawn much closer to the Railjack instead of many kilometers away. This should definitely help the pacing a lot. And finally, and this is amazing for solo players, if you destroy all engines on a cruise ship, it will disable its weapon and it will kill half the crew. Next up we have some Arcwing changes. So first of all, you can actually melee in Arcwing now, which is fantastic, and they increase the magnetism range or the lock-on range for melee by almost half, and they rebalanced of the melee weapons as well because they were pretty poor, so it was basically just a blanket buff. And a similar rebalance happened to Argans as well, because they will now use their heavy weapon stats, so you know, the stats you would get if you were to use them with a Gravimag in Atmosphere instead of their normal Arcwing stats, and the heavy gun stats with Gravimag are generally better on them. Plus we got a nice quality of life change for Argans because they now have a lead indicator, so it should be far easier to lead the target since none of them are actually hit scan in Railjack. Another massive change is the introduction of the Railjack Valence Fusion, which works similarly to the Valence Fusion that we have for Kuvalich weapons. So we can now take armaments and components and fuse them together to get better armaments and components. Now originally this was only possible with build items, but they've changed their mind, so you can now use direct to fuse build items, or you can use resources and credits to fuse unbuilt items, or you know, the wreckage and stuff. And the way it works is if you combine the same tier of items, you will get a 10% boost in stats. If one of them is one tier lower, you will get a 5% boost in stats, and if one of them is 2 tiers lower, you will get a 2% boost in stats. Also, this does not work with the Sigma stuff, so like the starter equipment you build in your dojo. Next up we have some changes to affinity, or more specifically intrinsics. So the conversion from affinity to intrinsics has been doubled, so you get twice the intrinsics now, and they also increase the amount of affinity you get from killing elite fighters and outriders, so even more intrinsics. Yay. Next on the menu we have some changes to the Avionics system, and what this boils down to is it's simpler now. You don't have 5 different avionics of a similar type that do kind of the same thing but not really, and you have to rank them up separately and all that, and none of that is in the game anymore. They basically just took all the fiddle farting out of avionics, which is a good thing. Now they did derank all the avionics in the process, so you will have to rank them up again once you log in, but they did refund all the derank you used to upgrade them. Now they did tweak a lot of the battle avionics as well, and the biggest ones are still the duration of void hull has gone from 25 seconds to 12, though they did increase the attraction strength, so it should actually suck fighters in much more efficiently now. And particle ram now requires forward velocity to be active, so you will only get it when you're moving forward now. And the final thing about avionics is that, well, we actually got some new ones. So we have deep hold, which increases forge capacity by 60%, cruising speed, which increases your railjack speed by 80% when there are no enemies within 3 kilometers of you. This one is going to be awesome, though I do hope it doesn't get triggered by the turrets or the cannon batteries or whatever they're called. Then there is quick lock, which decreases the ordnance lock-on time by 75%, artillery cheap shot, which gives forward artillery a 50% chance to not consume dome charges, ordnance cheap shot, which gives ordnance weapons a 50% chance not to consume munitions, and turret velocity, which increases turret range by up to 25.3% and it increases turret projectile speed by up to 55%. Now this update also finally introduced the changes to healing and damage reduction when it comes to defense targets. Now I'm not gonna go through these one by one because I feel like this is something that needs its own video, but if you want to check them out now, there is a link to the forum post in the video description. The TLDR is that more stuff will work on defense objectives, but some of the really good stuff has been nerfed. One example of the really good stuff being nerfed is that Garage Splinter Storm, which would previously grant the defense objective the full damage reduction, is now capped at 50%. But we are getting far more options with this update, like Baruch's Desolate Hand or even Ninja's Warding Halo will now work. Moving on from there, we have an interesting change indeed. So they took a bunch of Conclave or PvP mods and converted them to PvE. And they converted quite a few of them, so for the Warframe ones, we have Rumbled for Atlas, Prism Guard for Mirage, Purifying Flames for Ember, Power of 3 for Ivara, Deceptive Bond for Loki, Singularity for Nyx, Recharge Barrier for Vault, and Purging Slash for Excalibur. Some of these are really cool and build altering as well, like the Rumbled one for Atlas makes Rumblers turn you into a Rumbler instead of summoning Rumblers. So those were the Warframe ones, and then we have some weapon ones as well. We have Ambush Optics for Rubico, Brainstorm for Grakata, Directed Convergence for Supra, Focus Acceleration for Tetra, Shrapnel Rounds for Maillock, Skull Shots for Viper, and Double Tap for Latron. And then, out of nowhere, they decided to change the Simulor for like the billionth time, and I honestly don't even know what's going on with this weapon anymore. But anyway, I think that's enough blabbering for today, because if I were to go over everything, I would be here for like 2 hours, because there's a ton of fixes and a lot of smaller changes, so if you want to go through everything, click the link in the description. So, how do all these changes play out? How does it actually feel to play a Railjack now as opposed to playing Railjack before the update? Well, much better. It just feels much better. It's far less chaotic, it's just nicer. Arc Melee feels, for the lack of a better word, weird, just because of how it glues you to the target, and the Arc Melee weapons that I've tried felt a little bit weak when compared to some of the like really good Arc guns, like the Singas. The best change for me, combat-wise anyway, is definitely the cruise ship one, because, you know, I play solo most of the time, so being able to disable the cruise ship so it's not shredding through my ship all the time is really cool. And then you shoot at cruise ships where you have to destroy sort of these 3 antenna things before you can actually get inside or damage them are a nice twist, I think. Also, I'm not 100% sure that the particle ram change works, because I don't know, it just feels like it's active even if I'm standing still. And while I'm talking about the particle ram, they seriously need to either reduce or completely remove the particles that fly off of cruise ships when you touch them with the particle ram. It's not a problem when you're fighting a normal cruise ship because you can keep your distance, but when you're fighting one of the shielded ones and you need to get close to destroy the antennas, there are so many particles and you can't see a damn thing. And the best overall change for me would probably be the one done to the Avionics, because the previous version of Avionics was just unnecessarily complicated, and this is much better. And that is pretty much all I wanted to say, so I thank you very much for watching. As always guys, I hope you've enjoyed the video, and I will see you some other time. Bye bye.